I'm John Boyd, 44 years old, lead architect and co-founder of Boyd & Maxwell Architects. For the past 18 years, I've poured my heart and soul into this profession, building a reputation rooted in precision, reliability, and an unwavering commitment to sustainable design. When Eric Maxwell and I first partnered 7 years ago, we shared a vision to create a boutique firm that didn't just design buildings, but shaped experiences, communities, and futures. We worked tirelessly, securing major projects that reflected our dedication and expertise. Our office was a modest but vibrant space, walls lined with blueprints and digital monitors displaying CAD models, the hum of creative energy palpable. The faint scent of drafting ink mixed with fresh coffee filled the air during long nights. I remember the satisfaction in the meticulous details of every plan we developed, each line carefully considered, every measurement double-checked. These plans weren't just technical documents. They were the embodiment of years of research, collaboration, and countless revisions. They represented the trust our clients placed in us. But then the foundation I trusted so deeply began to crack. I discovered that Eric, my partner and co-founder, had unilaterally taken $520,000 worth of our completed project plans and quietly used them as the backbone to start his own architecture firm. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It unfolded in layers, like watching a slow-motion fracture in glass. When I confronted him, his response was cold and calculated. To our former clients, he claimed creative ownership of the work, as if the countless hours and shared efforts were his alone to claim. I remember the precise moment I realized what he had done. It was not just the theft of physical files or proprietary designs. It was a breach of trust that cut deeper than I anticipated. Eric spoke calmly, almost rehearsed, insisting that creative work belongs to the creator, trying to rewrite the narrative in his favor. His composure was unsettling. It was clear he had thought this through, expecting me to react impulsively or crumble, but I didn't. I replied with measured calm, a simple, understood. Outwardly, I maintained my professionalism. The architect's composure drilled into me through years of client meetings and project deadlines. Inside, though, a storm was gathering. Behind that quiet acceptance was a mind racing to assess, plan, and prepare for the fight ahead. This wasn't just about reclaiming stolen plans or protecting financial assets. It was about defending the integrity of my career, the reputation of Boyd & Maxwell, and the principle that creative work, especially in architecture, is inseparable from its creators and their legal rights. I knew I had to act swiftly but strategically. Reacting with anger or haste would only play into Eric's hands. Instead, I focused on gathering every piece of evidence, every contract clause, every digital trace that confirmed our ownership. I recalled the countless late nights spent embedding metadata into our CAD files, the rigorous version controls we implemented, the partnership agreements painstakingly crafted with the help of legal counsel. All these details, often overlooked by others, were now my strongest weapons. My thoughts shifted to the clients too. They had trusted us with their visions and investments. Eric's attempt to claim sole creative ownership was not only legally flawed, but ethically bankrupt. I resolved to maintain our clients' trust by approaching the situation with transparency and professionalism, even as I prepared the legal groundwork to counteract this calculated betrayal. Looking back at my office window, the city lights flickered, mirroring the chaos brewing beneath the surface of what once felt secure. The firm I helped build was at a crossroads, threatened by someone I once considered a partner, but I was determined. This challenge wouldn't break me or Boyd & Maxwell. Instead, it would become a defining moment, a test of resilience, strategy, and the unwavering belief that true creative work must be protected and honored. This was just the beginning. Over the course of 18 years, I dedicated myself to mastering the art and science of sustainable architectural design. From the very beginning of my career, I understood that architecture wasn't just about creating visually striking buildings. It was about crafting spaces that harmonize with their environment, respect resources, and serve the long-term needs of communities. Sustainable design became the cornerstone of my work ethic, driving me to continuously innovate and refine my approach. Throughout those years, I led numerous projects, each more complex and rewarding than the last. Together with my small but talented team, we secured contracts that brought in over $3.2 million in revenue. But beyond the financials, what truly mattered was the measurable impact we made, saving our clients an average of 15% in construction costs by implementing energy-efficient materials, smart layouts, and optimized resource use. These savings weren't just perks. They were integral to promoting responsible development that balanced economic and environmental interests. My process was meticulous. I personally developed and archived more than 120 detailed project plans. Every blueprint, CAD file, and specification underwent rigorous version control. That meant no stone was left unturned. Every revision tracked, every change logged, every detail double-checked for accuracy. The metadata embedded in these files told a story of careful collaboration, timestamps that proved when particular drafts were created, records of who contributed what, and layers of technical data that validated our ownership. Our digital backups were stored securely, with encryption protocols and redundant cloud storage, to ensure nothing would be lost, corrupted, or tampered with. This wasn't just administrative rigor. It was essential to maintaining the firm's professional credibility and protecting our intellectual property. I believed that these efforts were not merely about safeguarding files, but about honoring the trust our clients placed in us. They expected integrity, precision, and innovation in every project, and I was determined to deliver nothing less. The reputation Boyd and Maxwell built was grounded in this dedication to quality and sustainability. I was often the face of the firm during client meetings and site visits, explaining our design choices and demonstrating how our work could reduce environmental footprints while maximizing usability and aesthetics. This hands-on involvement created deep client trust and loyalty. Many of the projects were long-term collaborations where we became partners in bringing visionary concepts to life. However, this success and attention to detail, while instrumental to our growth, also made us vulnerable. Eric Maxwell, my partner, recognized the value embedded in our joint intellectual property, but he chose to overlook the contractual safeguards I insisted upon during our partnership. His ambition and impatience blinded him to the legal protections that stood between him and the unauthorized use of our work. Where I saw a shared responsibility to protect our firm's creative assets, Eric saw an opportunity to exploit them for his personal gain. He underestimated how thoroughly I had documented our projects and how carefully I had designed the legal framework around our partnership. These oversights would soon become his greatest weaknesses. As I reflected on all these years of experience, the countless hours of drafting, client negotiations, and legal consultations, I realized that what I had built wasn't just a portfolio of projects. It was a fortress of evidence, a foundation of rights and responsibilities, meticulously laid brick by brick. This foundation would be critical in the battle to come, a battle not just for money or reputation, but for the very essence of creative ownership in our profession. In that moment, I resolved that no matter how calculated Eric's betrayal was, my commitment to precision, legal clarity, and client trust would be far stronger. This was not just my career at stake. It was the principle that the creator's work must be protected, respected, and defended. I was ready to turn every detail I had painstakingly gathered over 18 years into the ammunition needed to reclaim what was ours. Eric Maxwell's motivations were as clear as they were misguided. He was driven by impatience and an ego that overshadowed reason. To him, the partnership we had forged was merely a stepping stone, a temporary arrangement he could sidestep once he figured out how to get what he wanted. His ambition blinded him to the legal and ethical boundaries that defined our collaboration. Instead of working through the established processes, Eric aimed to leapfrog them entirely by covertly taking our $520,000 worth of project plans we had painstakingly developed over years, and using them as the foundation for his own new firm. I remember the moment it dawned on me. Eric wasn't just trying to compete, he was attempting to rewrite the rules. He believed that by claiming creative ownership over the stolen plans, he could shield himself from any repercussions. His arrogance was almost palpable, assuming that clients would accept his narrative without question. But Eric overlooked a critical truth. Our partnership agreement had explicit clauses covering intellectual property ownership and non-compete provisions that he was blatantly violating. What Eric failed to grasp was how deeply embedded our legal safeguards were. Every project plan bore metadata, timestamps, authorship records, version histories that tied the work directly to Boyd and Maxwell Architects. These weren't just digital fingerprints. They were layers of protection we had carefully maintained to validate our ownership and discourage piracy. I had insisted from the earliest days that we implement rigorous version control protocols precisely to prevent any unauthorized use or misrepresentation. Eric's assumption that he could erase those records or claim them as his own was simply naive. Moreover, the contractual non-solicitation clauses were clear. Eric was prohibited from contacting or soliciting our clients within a defined period after leaving the firm. Yet I discovered communications where he bypassed these restrictions, quiet emails and phone calls attempting to lure our former clients to his new venture, armed with our proprietary plans as proof of his capabilities. It wasn't just a breach of contract, it was a betrayal of trust that risked unraveling years of client relationships, carefully nurtured through transparency and integrity. Knowing that we had these explicit protections in place strengthened my resolve. I reached out to Laura Jenkins, an intellectual property attorney with a sharp eye for detail and a reputation for being methodical and relentless. Laura was instrumental in helping me understand the full scope of Eric's legal exposure, and more importantly, how we could leverage our meticulously documented evidence. With her guidance, I began piecing together a strategy that wouldn't just respond to Eric's actions, but would systematically dismantle his attempts to appropriate our work. Laura's expertise was invaluable. She explained how the embedded metadata within our CAD files and digital archives could serve as undeniable proof of our authorship. She highlighted the strength of the partnership agreement's IP clauses, emphasizing that even if Eric claimed creative ownership, the legal documentation clearly named Boyd and Maxwell Architects as the rightful holders. This meant Eric's defense was hollow. His overconfidence was built on a shaky foundation. What struck me, too, was how Eric had underestimated the importance of the copyright registrations I had initiated months before his betrayal. Registering our designs with the Copyright Office wasn't just a formality, it was a proactive step to secure federal protection. These registrations gave us a powerful legal foothold, enabling formal infringement claims and potential damages. Eric's ignorance or disregard of these registrations revealed a critical oversight that would soon work to our advantage. At the same time, Laura cautioned me about the nuances of client relations. We had to maintain professionalism and avoid alienating clients who might be confused or uncertain about the situation. It was essential to reinforce their trust in Boyd and Maxwell while carefully documenting every interaction. Eric's attempts at client poaching needed to be countered with clear communication, emphasizing contractual exclusivity and the ethical obligations that bind our profession. Despite the sting of betrayal, I remained focused on facts and strategy. Eric's impatience and hubris had blinded him to the protective layers I had built around our work, layers that would form the backbone of our legal response. I was no longer just confronting a partner's duplicity. I was preparing to defend the principles that underpin creative integrity in architecture. As I reflected on Eric's miscalculations, I felt a growing sense of clarity. His plan to sidestep the non-compete and IP clauses was a reckless gamble, one that overlooked the very safeguards designed to prevent such appropriation. Our firm's intellectual property wasn't just a set of files or drawings. It was a carefully curated legacy backed by legal rigor and technical precision. With Laura's counsel and my detailed records, I was ready to expose the full extent of Eric's breach. The next steps required meticulous planning, assembling evidence, documenting every infringement, and preparing to assert our rights through the appropriate legal channels. This calculated betrayal would meet an equally calculated response, grounded not in emotion, but in law, documentation, and unwavering professionalism. Eric's attempt to claim creative ownership was nothing more than a hollow echo against the fortress of evidence we had built. I knew that protecting our firm's intellectual property wasn't just about reclaiming what was taken. It was about affirming the fundamental truth that true creative work belongs to its rightful creators, and that no amount of ambition or ego could rewrite that reality. Reviewing the full extent of Eric's betrayal was like peeling back layers of a carefully concealed deception, each revelation more unsettling than the last. I found myself sitting at my cluttered desk, the soft glow of the computer monitor, illuminating a growing stack of documents that suddenly felt heavier with each page I turned. There were termination papers, emails I hadn't seen before, client communications sent without my knowledge, and a stark invoice tallying the value of the stolen plans at $520,000. Every detail told a story of calculated duplicity. I started with Eric's termination documents. They were straightforward on the surface, official, formal, but beneath the sterile language lay a trail of unauthorized actions. The papers marked the severance of our partnership, but revealed no hint that Eric had already begun his covert exodus. The timing was crucial. These documents confirmed when he officially left, but prior to that date, evidence suggested he had quietly begun siphoning off our intellectual property, leveraging our hard-earned work to build his own foundation. Next, I delved into client communications that Eric had sent under the banner of his new firm. These emails were disturbing in their tone, professional on the surface, but insidiously persuasive beneath. He reached out to our former clients, flaunting designs that were unmistakably ours. His messages touted original creations and innovative solutions, weaving a narrative that attempted to erase our firm's involvement. This wasn't just a breach of contract. It felt like a personal attack on the trust we had painstakingly earned from those clients. I read through these emails carefully, every word fueling a quiet resolve to respond, not with fury, but with unassailable facts. The valuation report was a particularly stark reminder of the scale of loss. $520,000 assigned to plans that represented months, sometimes years, of collaborative effort between me, Eric, and our team. These were not simple sketches. They were comprehensive, detailed blueprints, embedded with specifications tailored to each client's unique needs. Seeing that figure in black and white transformed abstract betrayal into concrete consequences. With these documents spread before me, I turned my attention to our partnership agreement, a document I had once reviewed with Laura Jenkins meticulously. I read it line by line, clause by clause, searching for the legal armor we had built to protect our firm. The partnership clearly stated that all intellectual property created during our collaboration belonged jointly to Boyd and Maxwell Architects. There were explicit non-solicitation clauses, forbidding either partner from poaching clients or using proprietary materials for personal gain after departure. More importantly, the agreement outlined the ownership and use of project plans. It demanded that any materials developed under the firm's name remain the property of the partnership, barring individual claims. Eric's actions, claiming sole creative ownership and contacting clients with stolen plans, stood in direct violation of these terms. It was a textbook breach, and yet knowing the law was one thing, proving it was another. That's where the email trails and file metadata became invaluable. I pored over thousands of emails exchanged between me, Eric, and our clients, pinpointing dates and content that illustrated intent and knowledge. There were emails where Eric acknowledged the joint ownership of project plans, conversations confirming version updates, and records of client approvals linked explicitly to our firm. These messages contradicted Eric's narrative, exposing his duplicity. Even more telling were the technical details embedded in our digital files, the metadata. Each CAD drawing, blueprint, and specification carried a digital fingerprint, time-stamped and attributed to our firm. This metadata was frozen in time, a silent witness to the true origin of the creative work. Eric had tried to strip away this trail, but the digital records were resilient, revealing unauthorized copying and use far beyond his departure date. I reminded myself not to let frustration cloud my judgment. Objectivity was critical. This wasn't about personal vendettas. It was about dismantling a carefully constructed lie with facts and strategy. I identified clear leverage points: the registered copyrights held by Boyd and Maxwell, the contractual exclusivity clauses binding both partners, and Eric's blatant failure to secure any licensing or permissions for his new firm's use of our proprietary designs. Each piece of evidence, when viewed alone, might seem insufficient. But together, they formed a compelling interlocking case. The sheer volume and consistency of documentation would be difficult for Eric or his legal team to contest. More importantly, this methodical review fortified my confidence that the law was on our side. My thoughts shifted toward the next steps: how to turn this mountain of evidence into a legal and professional response that would not just reclaim the stolen work, but reaffirm the principles of creative ownership. I knew that any misstep or premature exposure could weaken our position or damage client relationships. At that moment, sitting amidst the scattered papers and glowing screens, a cold clarity settled in. Eric's betrayal was extensive and audacious, but it was also flawed. His hubris had blinded him to the very safeguards that I had insisted upon. Those safeguards had not only preserved our intellectual property, but had now become the foundation of our impending counterattack. I felt a quiet determination grow stronger inside me, fueled by the knowledge that the truth was written not just in words but in contracts, emails, metadata, and the unwavering trust of our clients. The battle ahead would be complex, but armed with this comprehensive assessment, I was ready to move forward with precision and resolve. Working closely with Laura Jenkins marked a pivotal shift from quiet assessment to decisive action. I knew that to confront Eric's calculated betrayal effectively, we had to build an airtight dossier, one grounded not only in legal theory, but in concrete, chronological evidence that would stand up to scrutiny in court and industry regulatory hearings. Laura, with her methodical precision and legal acumen, became the perfect partner in this effort, guiding me through the complex maze of intellectual property law and contract enforcement. Our first step was assembling a comprehensive archive of every project plan tied to the $520,000 valuation. This meant retrieving digital files from the firm's secured cloud storage and internal servers, where each plan sat meticulously catalogued with embedded metadata, timestamps, version histories, and contributor logs that spoke volumes about the origin and evolution of our designs. I spent hours cross-verifying each file, ensuring the completeness and integrity of our set. These weren't just digital blueprints. They were the tangible proof of our creative and technical labor, layered with the history of collaboration and innovation. Next, Laura emphasized the critical importance of documenting the timeline of Eric's actions. We gathered every pertinent email, those showing his knowledge and involvement in the projects, plus the unauthorized client communications he sent after leaving the firm. Her expertise helped us identify messages that demonstrated intent and deliberate breach, solicitation emails, misleading claims of sole creative ownership, and attempts to downplay the partnership's contributions. These emails formed a narrative thread, proving not only what Eric did, but how and when he did it, critical elements in infringement and breach of contract cases. Beyond emails and plans, we secured copies of all client contracts that contained exclusivity and intellectual property clauses. These contracts detailed the parameters of ownership and usage rights, making it unequivocally clear that our designs belonged to Boyd and Maxwell Architects. Laura pointed out how these agreements, combined with the partnership's non-solicitation clauses, created a legal web around our intellectual property, one Eric had knowingly trampled on. Recognizing the importance of corroboration, we reached out discreetly to colleagues and collaborators who had observed Eric's behavior or had been involved in project development. Their witness statements were carefully documented, providing an external, impartial perspective that validated our claims and added emotional weight to the technical evidence. These accounts described Eric's unauthorized copying of files, attempts to bypass approval protocols, and his aggressive client outreach under his new firm's banner. Simultaneously, Laura and I organized a detailed financial analysis of the damages, a painstaking breakdown of lost revenue, potential contract disruptions, and the broader impacts on Boyd and Maxwell's market positioning. This analysis quantified the $520,000 valuation not as an abstract figure, but as a concrete representation of months of work, lost opportunities, and the intangible value of client trust. We also factored in estimated legal fees and potential penalties, preparing our case to demand full restitution. Throughout this process, we backed up every piece of evidence redundantly, encrypted digital copies secured in multiple locations, alongside printed time-stamped hard copies. Laura insisted on this level of documentation to guard against any claims of tampering or loss, ensuring that our dossier would remain intact and credible at every stage of potential litigation. Finally, we plotted our legal course. Laura recommended filing formal complaints with the Copyright Office, initiating the official infringement process, and preparing breach of contract claims for civil court. She also highlighted the strategic value of notifying architectural licensing boards and professional organizations, setting the stage for potential disciplinary action against Eric's firm. As I coordinated all these moving parts, my internal mantra was clear. Their oversight of copyright registration is our entry point for legal leverage. Eric's failure to recognize or respect the legal protections we had established was a critical vulnerability. Our comprehensive dossier wasn't just a collection of documents, it was a fortress of undeniable proof, ready to reinforce our claim and dismantle his attempt to appropriate our work. While the weight of betrayal lingered, I felt an unwavering resolve. The battle ahead would demand patience, precision, and professionalism. But with Laura's expertise and the evidence we painstakingly gathered, I was confident our response would be measured, systematic, and ultimately effective. The foundation was set. The next steps would determine how firmly we could reclaim what was rightfully ours. Laura Jenkins was relentless. I quickly came to appreciate that about her. From the moment I handed over our partnership agreement, copyright registrations, and the trove of evidence we'd compiled, she dived deep into every document with a rigor that was both meticulous and exacting. Sitting across from me in her office, surrounded by piles of printed contracts, digital storage devices, and a seemingly endless stream of legal reference books, she walked me through her findings with steady confidence. First, she confirmed what I had hoped, but was still hard to fully accept. Eric Maxwell's actions clearly constituted infringement. The partnership agreement, painstakingly drafted with legal counsel during our firm's formation, unambiguously stated that all intellectual property created within Boyd and Maxwell Architects belonged jointly to the partnership. There was no room for interpretation or loopholes. Any project plans developed during our collaboration, including the ones Eric had taken, were explicitly owned by the firm, not by either partner individually. Laura's sharp eyes caught every nuance. She pointed out the specific clauses that addressed ownership and use of project materials, emphasizing the legally binding nature of the non-solicitation provisions Eric had blatantly ignored. "This isn't just a breach of contract, it's a violation of fiduciary duty," she explained. "He owed Boyd and Maxwell Architects a duty of loyalty and good faith, and by misappropriating these plans and soliciting clients under false pretenses, he's in breach on multiple fronts." What really solidified our case, though, was the copyright registration documentation I had initiated months before Eric's departure. Laura walked me through the importance of these registrations, underscoring how they provided us with federal protection that went beyond state contract law. "Registered copyrights give you a strong legal foothold," she said. "They allow you to file infringement complaints with the Copyright Office and pursue statutory damages in court. Eric's ignorance of these protections is a critical oversight, and that's where we have leverage." We then turned to the evidence embedded in the project plans themselves. I showed Laura the metadata trails, detailed digital footprints that linked each CAD file, blueprint, and specification directly back to Boyd and Maxwell Architects. Embedded timestamps, version control data, and authorship records formed an irrefutable chain of custody that tied the plans to our firm. "This technical evidence is like a silent witness," Laura noted. "It can be authenticated in court to establish authorship and prove unauthorized use. Eric can't simply erase these digital traces." In parallel, we scrutinized the email exchanges and client communications. Laura highlighted emails that Eric sent post-termination, where he made misleading claims of creative ownership and attempted to persuade clients to transfer their business to his new firm. These messages, carefully preserved and timestamped, revealed his intent to poach clients and capitalize on our proprietary work. "Intent matters legally," Laura said. "This isn't an accidental misstep, it's a calculated strategy to appropriate your firm's assets and goodwill." To strengthen our position, we also gathered client contracts containing exclusivity and intellectual property clauses. Those contracts explicitly stated that the designs, plans, and materials were owned by Boyd and Maxwell and could not be used or shared without express permission. Laura emphasized how these contracts formed a protective web around our intellectual property, making Eric's unauthorized use a clear contractual violation. These terms create a strong deterrent against client solicitation and usage without authorization, she explained. Understanding the value of corroborative testimony, Laura suggested we collect witness statements from colleagues and collaborators who had observed Eric's behavior. We discreetly reached out to trusted team members who could attest to his copying of files, bypassing approval protocols, and his aggressive client outreach. These statements added an important human element to the technical evidence, painting a fuller picture of Eric's breach. Concurrent with this, Laura and I worked on a comprehensive financial analysis to present the scope of damages, quantifying lost revenue, potential contract disruptions, and the overall impact on Boyd and Maxwell's market position. The $520,000 valuation was more than a number. It represented months of work, lost opportunities, and the erosion of trust with our clients. We incorporated projected legal costs and potential penalties, preparing a figure that would underpin our claims for restitution. Throughout this process, Laura insisted on rigorous documentation and security protocols. Every piece of evidence was stored redundantly, in encrypted digital backups across multiple secure platforms, and in physical form, time-stamped and logged. She stressed the importance of guarding against any claims of evidence tampering or loss. In litigation, credibility is everything, she said bluntly. Finally, our strategy coalesced into a clear plan of action. Laura recommended filing formal infringement complaints with the Copyright Office, initiating breach of contract claims in civil court, and notifying architectural licensing boards and professional bodies to trigger potential disciplinary proceedings. This multi-pronged approach maximizes pressure, she explained. By targeting legal, regulatory, and professional channels, we create a comprehensive front that Eric won't be able to ignore. As I pieced all this together, I realized how critical our prior diligence had been. Every detail meticulously documented, every contract clause carefully negotiated, every file labeled and backed up. Eric's arrogance in ignoring these protections was his greatest vulnerability. Our prepared dossier wasn't just a collection of documents. It was an unbreakable fortress built from years of careful work. Sitting back in her office, absorbing the weight of Laura's analysis, I felt a calm resolve settle over me. This wasn't a personal vendetta. It was a principled stand, grounded in law and evidence, a battle to protect what we rightfully owned. The path ahead demanded patience and precision, but armed with Laura's expertise and our comprehensive case, I knew we were ready to hold Eric accountable and to reassert the integrity of Boyd and Maxwell Architects. Serving Eric's firm with the formal infringement notices was a pivotal moment, a turning point where strategy replaced speculation and the protective measures we'd painstakingly assembled moved into action. I remember the weight of those documents in my hands, legal language that distilled months of betrayal and meticulous investigation into clearly articulated claims. The letters, crafted with Laura's precise legal guidance, outlined the unauthorized use of our $520,000 worth of project plans, the breach of our partnership agreement, and the violation of our intellectual property rights. Sending those notices wasn't just a procedural formality, it was a declaration that we wouldn't tolerate this infringement quietly or passively. Simultaneously, we filed regulatory complaints with the American Institute of Architects, AIA. This step was crucial. It moved beyond civil litigation into the realm of professional accountability. The AIA's Code of Ethics explicitly condemns actions like misappropriation of creative work and client poaching, and their disciplinary processes could impose sanctions ranging from fines to suspension or revocation of architectural licenses. Submitting our complaint meant Eric's professional credibility was now under scrutiny, and that possibility hung over him like a storm cloud no legal defense could easily dissipate. While this legal and regulatory machinery churned in the background, I focused intensely on client relations. The clients had been caught in the crossfire of this dispute, and maintaining their confidence was paramount. I initiated direct, transparent communications with them, not to air grievances or assign blame, but to reaffirm Boyd and Maxwell's commitment to integrity, quality, and the exclusive ownership of our architectural work. Every conversation was measured, professional, designed to restore trust and clarify the contractual protections that safeguarded their projects. I knew that these relationships were the lifeblood of our firm, and that eroding client trust could deliver a blow far worse than financial loss. To further protect our firm's revenue stream and professional future, I accepted a consulting role with a larger, well-established architectural firm. This wasn't merely a fallback. It was a strategic move to ensure continuity of income and to broaden my professional network while Boyd and Maxwell navigated the turbulent litigation period. The consulting position also served as a signal to industry peers and clients alike that I remained fully engaged, respected, and in command of my professional path, even amid adversity. Meanwhile, Eric seemed oblivious to the gathering storm. He pressed ahead with onboarding his team, expanding operations under his fledgling firm's banner. From the outside, his actions suggested confidence, even optimism. Yet beneath that surface, I sensed a disconnect, a lack of awareness or perhaps denial of the legal and professional consequences his decisions were triggering. I monitored his firm's public communications and client interactions carefully, noting every misstep or overreach that could be used to reinforce our case. Throughout this period, I maintained a strict code of professionalism. Project handovers were executed with precision, ensuring that no disruption came to clients due to the internal conflict. I responded to inquiries, whether from clients, contractors, or partners, with measured clarity, avoiding any comments that might compromise our legal position or inflame tensions. Behind the scenes, my communications with Laura were frequent and detailed, ensuring every development was documented and every potential risk anticipated. This phase was a delicate balancing act, asserting our rights firmly, without escalating the conflict into public spectacle or damaging our firm's hard-earned reputation. The infringement notices and regulatory complaints were tools of leverage, but their power depended on maintaining credibility, transparency, and unwavering professionalism in every interaction. I was determined to demonstrate that Boyd and Maxwell Architects was not just a victim, but a resilient entity, capable of defending its principles and its creative legacy with calm authority. The filing of complaints and notices marked only the beginning of this next chapter. As legal processes loomed, I knew that patience and strategic communication would be essential. Each move needed to be calculated. Every word, every gesture weighed for maximum effect. The foundation laid by our detailed documentation and legal counsel was solid, but the unfolding responses, both from Eric's side and our clients, would shape the trajectory of this dispute. In those long days and nights, the firm's future felt fragile, yet not fragile enough to break. It was a crucible testing not just contracts and copyrights, but the very character of our partnership's legacy. My focus remained unshaken to protect what we'd built, to uphold the sanctity of creative ownership, and to navigate the storm with the precision and professionalism that had defined my career. The battle lines were drawn, but how the conflict would unfold was still unwritten. Within just a few weeks after serving the infringement notices and filing complaints, the ripple effects on Eric's fledgling firm became unmistakably clear. At first, the shifts were subtle. Clients who had once seemed eager to engage with his new venture began to hesitate, their enthusiasm clouded by uncertainty. I could sense the tide turning not merely because of legal pressure, but because the professional community was starting to take notice. One of the earliest signs came through indirect channels. A longtime client of ours, someone who'd been courted aggressively by Eric after his departure, reached out with cautious questions. The tone of their emails shifted from excitement about new possibilities to concern over contractual obligations and intellectual property rights. They weren't sure whom to trust anymore. When I spoke with them, I maintained calm reassurance, reaffirming Boyd and Maxwell's commitment to integrity and exclusive project ownership. I emphasized the binding nature of our contracts and the ethical standards that underpin our work. Their relief was palpable, but the damage to Eric's credibility had already begun. Meanwhile, within Eric's own operations, cracks started to appear that were less visible, but no less consequential. Reports from mutual industry contacts hinted at growing internal difficulties. His team struggled to replicate the depth and precision of our original designs, which were the very foundation he had tried to appropriate. The proprietary knowledge embedded in our plans, the nuanced understanding of sustainable materials, the carefully calibrated structural innovations was not something that could be easily reverse-engineered. As a result, system failures began to surface, project milestones slipped, and technical errors increased. I heard whispers of frustration within his office, of surprises and setbacks that hampered progress. At the same time, regulatory inquiries quietly gained momentum. The American Institute of Architects had begun their review of our formal complaints. Though these investigations are never publicized immediately, their existence sends a powerful message within the industry. Eric's reputation, once largely untarnished, was now under scrutiny by the very bodies charged with upholding our profession's ethical standards. Word spreads fast in architectural circles. The mere fact of such an inquiry can sow doubt among clients and collaborators. Amid this gathering storm, Eric made a series of desperate moves. I received filtered reports through legal counsel that he attempted to reach out for consulting assistance, seeking to patch the faltering technical side of his business. These overtures were carefully managed. I declined all direct contact to preserve the integrity of our legal case and maintain a clear record of communication. My legal team responded formally, reiterating that any negotiations or discussions would have to proceed through attorneys. Further, there were attempts at initiating settlement talks, but these were tentative and lacked any substantive offer. Eric's outreach seemed more about buying time and easing pressure than making genuine amends. His posture betrayed a man scrambling to steady a sinking ship, caught off guard by the legal and professional consequences he had underestimated. The mounting pressure from multiple fronts began to erode Eric's firm's foundations. Clients who had initially been intrigued by the promise of fresh leadership started reconsidering contracts. Some sent written notices expressing discomfort with the ongoing legal controversy and the potential risks to their projects. Others delayed decisions or paused negotiations, waiting to see how the dispute would unfold. This hesitation translated into tangible financial strain for Eric's operation, compounding the technical setbacks. Throughout this period, I maintained a tight focus on professionalism and client care. I knew that any sign of weakness or emotional reaction on my part could be exploited. Instead, I doubled down on transparent communication with our clients, ensuring they were kept informed of the legal realities without exposing internal details or airing grievances. My goal was clear: to reinforce trust in Boyd & Maxwell's stability, integrity, and exclusive rights to the projects we had developed together. This strategic patience was critical. The situation was far from resolved, but each hesitant step Eric's firm took was a confirmation that the protections we had meticulously built were working. His failure to respect the legal safeguards, coupled with the tangible consequences of his unauthorized actions, was unraveling his nascent business. The regulatory bodies intensifying their investigations, combined with the erosion of client confidence and technical difficulties, created a perfect storm of professional setbacks. As I observed these developments, I remained vigilant and measured, preparing for the next phase. The battle was evolving, and every piece of evidence, every client reaction, and every regulatory move added to the momentum we needed to reclaim what was rightfully ours. Eric's firm was faltering under the weight of its own misjudgments, and I was ready to ensure that this unraveling did not merely end at setbacks, but led to accountable resolution. The weeks ahead promised to be challenging, but the early signs were clear. The professional and legal consequences of Eric's betrayal were beginning to take hold. Simultaneously, while the regulatory complaints and infringement notices were underway, my legal team and I took the next decisive step. We filed a civil lawsuit against Eric Maxwell and his fledgling firm. The lawsuit was comprehensive, citing $520,000 in damages for copyright infringement and breach of contract. Every clause of our partnership agreement violated by Eric was detailed meticulously, and the sheer weight of evidence we had compiled left little room for dispute. This filing wasn't just a formality. It was an assertion of our firm's rights and a clear message that Boyd & Maxwell Architects would defend what was ours with every legal tool at our disposal. The day I signed the lawsuit documents, I remember feeling a mix of resolve and gravity. This wasn't just about recovering financial losses. It was about standing firm against a betrayal that threatened the very fabric of our professional identity. I recalled the countless hours spent crafting each project plan, The collaborative energy poured into designs that had shaped communities and brought our clients' visions to life. To see those plans misappropriated and paraded as the sole work of Eric was a personal affront, but I knew that responding with measured legal precision was the only way forward. Almost immediately after filing, the Copyright Office reviewed our infringement complaint with careful attention. Their validation was a critical milestone. It confirmed that our registered copyrights were legitimate and that Eric's unauthorized use constituted a clear violation. Receiving that acknowledgement from a federal agency gave our case substantial weight and opened the door for formal infringement proceedings. I recall the moment I read the office's response. It was a quiet but powerful vindication of all the painstaking groundwork Laura and I had laid. The impact on Eric's firm was palpable and swift. News of the official complaint and lawsuit began to ripple through the industry and our shared client network. Several clients, upon hearing of the dispute, started to reconsider their engagements. Some reached out expressing concern over contractual obligations, while others, previously courted by Eric, decided to reaffirm their loyalty to Boyd and Maxwell. These shifts were more than just business decisions. They reflected the ethical standards and trustworthiness that define professional relationships in architecture. Throughout this period, expert witnesses were retained to bolster our case. Seasoned architects and digital forensic specialists examined the designs, metadata trails, and correspondence, providing unbiased authentication of our authorship and the uniqueness of our plans. Their expert testimony was crucial. It translated complex technical evidence into clear, authoritative statements that courts could easily understand. Knowing that these experts backed our claims added another layer of confidence to the legal strategy. Eric, confronted with mounting evidence and growing losses, began exploring options to stem the tide. Through his legal counsel, he approached us with tentative proposals for out-of-court settlements and even offers to reintegrate into Boyd and Maxwell under negotiated terms. But I remained steadfast. I communicated through my attorneys that no informal agreements would be entertained at this stage. My position was clear and measured. My attorneys will be in touch. This wasn't about personal grudges, but about upholding the principle that creative work is protected by law and ethical professional conduct. The lawsuit also strategically underscored the breach of fiduciary duty Eric owed as a partner. Laura explained that this added gravity to the case, showing that his actions were not merely contractual violations, but a deeper betrayal of trust and professional responsibility. This argument resonated strongly in court filings and served to frame Eric's conduct in the harshest legal light. Meanwhile, our communications with clients remained deliberately transparent and professional. I made it a point to reassure them that Boyd and Maxwell was not only protecting their project's intellectual property, but also committed to delivering the highest standards of service uninterrupted. This helped stabilize client relationships and prevented Eric's attempts to sow doubt from gaining traction. As legal proceedings advanced, the professional community watched closely. The combination of federal validation from the Copyright Office, detailed contracts, expert testimony, and the civil lawsuit formed a multifaceted offensive, one that was both legal and reputational. Eric's firm found itself increasingly isolated, squeezed between mounting legal pressure and eroding client confidence. Reflecting on this phase, I understood that the lawsuit wasn't just a reaction, but a necessary escalation in a complex battle over creative ownership and professional integrity. Every document filed, every expert report submitted, and every client conversation held was part of a broader effort to assert rightful ownership and protect the legacy of Boyd and Maxwell architects. The fight was far from over, but the momentum was unmistakably shifting in our favor, setting the stage for more profound consequences to follow. The unraveling of Eric Maxwell's firm happened faster than I had anticipated, a cascade of professional and financial setbacks that left little room for recovery. It was almost surreal to witness someone I once trusted spiral so rapidly into chaos, all stemming from his reckless decision to appropriate our firm's intellectual property and breach every contract clause protecting that work. It began with the regulatory repercussions. The American Institute of Architects had launched a thorough investigation following our formal complaints. Within weeks, the repercussions became public knowledge within industry circles. Eric faced multiple violations cited by the AIA's Ethics Committee: misappropriation of creative work, breach of fiduciary duty, and client solicitation violations. The penalties were severe: $150,000 in fines, which alone crippled his fledgling firm's cash flow. But more damaging was the formal notice that his architectural license was under review for potential suspension or revocation. For an architect, that sort of professional sanction is almost like a death sentence, threatening not only current projects but future prospects across the board. Simultaneously, internal turmoil within Eric's firm accelerated his downfall. Word spread that senior staff were resigning, unwilling to be associated with a firm mired in legal and ethical controversy. The talented team he had tried to assemble before betraying our firm began fracturing under pressure. Project timelines slipped as critical expertise walked out the door. The proprietary knowledge embedded in our stolen plans wasn't something Eric could replicate or teach overnight. It was the result of years of collaborative development and complex sustainable design strategies. The technical shortcomings became glaring, and clients started noticing. Reports of design flaws, delays, and miscommunications filtered back to me through trusted industry contacts. Amid these developments, Eric's clients, many of whom had been lured away from us, began expressing doubts. Some sent formal letters to distance themselves from his firm, citing concerns about intellectual property integrity and contract violations. Others quietly paused negotiations or outright withdrew pending resolution of the legal disputes. The erosion of client trust was palpable and swift, a direct consequence of Eric's actions and the mounting legal pressure bearing down on him. Financially, Eric's operation was hemorrhaging. The regulatory fines, combined with lost projects and legal defense costs, quickly overwhelmed his cash reserves. Rumors circulated that investors and backers were pulling support, unwilling to stake their money on a firm facing federal complaints and professional sanctions. The public nature of the lawsuit and the Copyright Office's infringement proceedings were a public relations disaster that compounded the firm's instability. Perhaps most heartbreakingly for me, though, was learning that Eric himself had been terminated from the firm he started. His once hopeful venture had collapsed under the weight of its own failings and the consequences of his betrayal. The termination was not publicly detailed, but industry whispers confirmed that his board or investors had decided to cut ties, citing mismanagement and the untenable legal liabilities he brought upon them. For a man who had been so confident and overreaching, the fall was devastatingly swift and total. The professional consequences extended beyond fines and termination. Investigations by the State Architectural Board moved forward, culminating in the suspension of Eric's license. The board cited ethical violations and failure to adhere to professional standards as grounds for disciplinary action. Losing his license was not just a personal blow, but a public professional disgrace, effectively barring him from practicing architecture independently in the state. The license revocation was a strong message to the broader community. Legal and ethical breaches in creative work would not be tolerated. Meanwhile, industry publications and forums began highlighting the case. Articles and discussions painted Eric's conduct as a cautionary tale about the perils of ignoring contractual safeguards and intellectual property protections. The story spread among architectural circles, reinforcing the importance of rigorous documentation and ethical practice. While the attention was difficult to witness, it further isolated Eric and validated our firm's stance on protecting creative ownership. On the client side, the fallout benefited Boyd and Maxwell significantly. Many of our former clients who had been approached by Eric reaffirmed their contracts with us, expressing renewed trust in our integrity and professionalism. I made it a point to personally reach out, listening to their concerns and reinforcing the firm's commitment to transparency and excellence. These conversations were vital, not just for business continuity, but for restoring confidence shaken by the dispute. The legal judgments soon followed. Courts awarded Boyd and Maxwell compensatory damages totaling $520,000, effectively covering the value of the stolen project plans. In addition, punitive damages of $100,000 were imposed, sending a clear message that willful infringement and breach of fiduciary duty would be met with firm consequences. Legal fees, which had mounted substantially, were also included in the final financial awards, pushing the total sum in our favor to approximately $675,000. The judgments didn't stop at monetary restitution. A mandatory injunction was issued, barring Eric and his firm from using any intellectual property associated with Boyd and Maxwell Architects. This legal order was critical. It prevented him from continuing to exploit our designs or client relationships, protecting not only our current projects, but the firm's long-term reputation and market position. Financially, the repercussions extended to Eric's personal assets. Creditors and legal representatives moved swiftly to enforce liens and judgments against him, seeking to recover the awarded sums. The personal toll was evident. His lifestyle, previously marked by ambition and optimism, was now constrained by legal and financial burdens stemming from his ethical breaches. Witnessing the professional destruction unfold was a sobering experience. It underscored how deeply intertwined trust, ethics, and legal protections are within architecture. A single breach could unravel careers, reputations, and financial stability. Yet through this difficult ordeal, I remained focused on representing Boyd and Maxwell with unwavering professionalism and integrity. The firm itself emerged from the crisis strengthened. Clients appreciated our resilience and commitment to safeguarding their interests. Our internal teams rallied, inspired by the clarity that diligence, transparency, and legal rigor were essential not only for design excellence, but for survival in a competitive and trust-dependent industry. This episode reinforced the critical importance of clear contractual frameworks, proactive intellectual property management, and ethical partnership conduct. As Eric's empire crumbled, the industry watched closely. The case became a benchmark for handling intellectual property disputes in architecture, proof that legal systems and professional bodies would uphold creators' rights and hold violators accountable. For me, the experience was a powerful reminder that protecting creative assets demands vigilance, patience, and a steadfast commitment to principle. The professional landscape had shifted beneath us, but Boyd and Maxwell Architects stood firm. The challenges were profound, yet the victory was not mine alone. It belonged to every architect who believes that creative work, painstakingly crafted and legally protected, is more than just designs on paper. It is a legacy of trust and innovation that must be fiercely defended. And defend it we did, but the fight wasn't over yet. The legal battles and professional repercussions, while decisive, were just steps towards securing the firm's future and restoring full confidence among clients and colleagues alike. The final court rulings arrived like a decisive verdict, not only on the monetary front, but also on the professional and ethical battleground that had consumed months of intense legal maneuvering. Sitting in the quiet of my office, the weight of the judgment documents felt profound, as if each page sealed a chapter of betrayal, resilience, and justice. The court awarded Boyd and Maxwell Architects compensatory damages of $520,000, a figure precisely aligned with the value of the stolen project plans that Eric Maxwell had unlawfully taken. This award wasn't merely a reimbursement. It represented formal recognition of the tangible loss inflicted upon our firm, the countless hours, the technical ingenuity, and the client trust that those plans embodied. But the ruling went further. Beyond compensatory damages, the court imposed punitive fines totaling $100,000. These fines sent a clear, unmistakable message. Willful infringement and breach of fiduciary duty in professional partnerships are met not with mere financial restitution, but with stern penalties designed to deter such conduct. The punitive damages underscored the court's condemnation of Eric's deliberate and reckless actions, emphasizing that his opportunistic betrayal was not just a contractual violation, but an affront to the standards of professional ethics in architecture. This legal rebuke reverberated profoundly, not just within our firm, but throughout our professional community. Equally important was the mandatory injunction included in the judgment. The court explicitly barred Eric Maxwell and his firm from using any intellectual property originating from Boyd and Maxwell Architects. This injunction was a critical safeguard, effectively severing Eric's ability to exploit our proprietary designs and project plans moving forward. The injunction's scope was comprehensive, covering all materials, digital files, and derivative works linked to our firm's creative output. I recall imagining the legal force of this order as an invisible barrier enveloping our intellectual property, shielding it from further misuse and protecting the integrity of our ongoing and future projects. The injunction didn't just protect assets, it protected the reputation and standing of Boyd and Maxwell in the architectural community. The symbolism was unmistakable. Creative work belongs to its rightful creators, and courts will enforce protections rigorously to uphold that principle. The ruling also directly supported the validity of the exhaustive documentation and copyright registrations we had painstakingly maintained. It vindicated all the strategic decisions made, embedding metadata, registering copyrights early, and crafting precise contractual provisions. Beyond the courtroom, the State Architectural Board took immediate action. They revoked Eric's architectural license, citing ethical violations tied to his misappropriation of intellectual property and breach of fiduciary duty. The loss of licensure was a devastating blow to his ability to practice professionally and marked a public acknowledgement of the severity of his misconduct. I understood well that such a license revocation wasn't just punitive, it was a protective measure for the profession and the public, ensuring that those who violate core ethical standards are barred from continuing to practice without accountability. Industry forums, professional associations, and architectural publications began citing this case as a watershed precedent. It became a reference point, illustrating the necessity of rigorous contractual safeguards and proactive intellectual property management. I followed discussions where seasoned architects debated the implications, reflecting on how our firm's experience underscored vulnerabilities in partnership agreements and the vital importance of clear legal protections tailored to creative professions. The case reinforced a collective awareness that architecture, like any creative endeavor, cannot thrive without respect for the ownership of ideas and designs. Financially, the court's rulings extended beyond damages and fines. As part of the dissolution of our partnership, I received a full severance package and an equity buyout totaling $250,000. This compensation recognized both my contributions to the firm's establishment and the disruption caused by Eric's betrayal. It was a tangible acknowledgement of the professional and personal costs I had borne throughout this ordeal. While no amount of money could fully erase the emotional toll, this settlement provided a foundation for rebuilding and moving forward. The judgments, both legal and financial, sent ripples through our network of colleagues and clients. Many expressed renewed respect for Boyd and Maxwell's steadfastness and the principled stand we had taken. Conversations with peers highlighted the broader lessons learned, how important it is to anticipate potential internal conflicts and embed airtight protections that safeguard creative assets from internal exploitation. Our experience became a cautionary tale, but also a source of guidance for firms navigating the complex intersection of creativity, partnership, and law. Through it all, I reflected on how integral the meticulous documentation and legal preparation had been in securing this outcome. The embedded metadata in our CAD files, the timely copyright registrations, the carefully negotiated partnership agreement, and the diligent client contract provisions had formed an unbreakable chain of evidence. Without that foundation, achieving this comprehensive judgment would have been far more difficult, if not impossible. As the formal legal battles drew to this decisive point, the professional community's recognition of the case's implications grew. The ruling affirmed that ethical breaches in creative collaborations carry significant consequences and that the protection of intellectual property is paramount in architectural practice. This precedent would influence contract drafting, partnership negotiations, and dispute resolutions for years to come. While this legal victory marked a critical milestone, it was clear that the journey wasn't solely about compensation or sanctions. It was about restoring trust in myself, in the firm, and in the profession at large. It was about reaffirming that dedication, integrity, and legal prudence form the bedrock of sustainable creative ventures. And so, with the court's decisions solidified and the industry's attention captured, I prepared to channel the lessons learned into rebuilding a firm that not only designs buildings, but embodies the principles of trust, protection, and resilience fundamental to our craft. The fight to protect creative ownership had been arduous, but the rewards, both tangible and intangible, would shape the future of Boyd and Maxwell Architects and the wider architectural community. Today, I stand at the helm of a new architectural firm, one that not only carries forward the legacy of Boyd and Maxwell, but has surpassed it in growth and scope. Our revenue has doubled compared to what we achieved before the dispute began, a tangible sign that resilience and strategic focus can transform adversity into opportunity. The lessons from that painful chapter have become embedded in every facet of our new practice, guiding us toward greater professionalism, stronger client relationships, and an unshakable commitment to protecting what we create. One of the most profound changes has been how we handle documentation and intellectual property. Gone are the days of relying on basic safeguards or informal agreements. Now, meticulous documentation is the backbone of our workflow. Every project plan, every CAD file, every specification is systematically archived with multiple layers of version control and embedded metadata that irrefutably tie the work to our firm. We've expanded our digital security protocols, leveraging encrypted backups and redundant cloud storage to ensure that nothing can be lost, corrupted, or misappropriated without immediate detection. This level of diligence is no longer just a precaution. It is a fundamental principle embedded into our culture. Proactive copyright registration has become routine. Every new design, every innovative concept, even preliminary sketches are registered with the Copyright Office as part of our standard operating procedures. This wasn't always the case. Before the ordeal with Eric, copyright registration felt like an administrative hurdle. Now I understand it as an essential legal shield. These registrations provide us with a powerful and defensible claim to ownership, allowing us to act swiftly and decisively if infringement ever arises again. The lessons of the past shaped this transformation. The experience taught me that waiting until after a dispute is too late. Our contractual frameworks have also been fortified. Partnership agreements, client contracts, and subcontractor engagements are drafted with exacting legal precision. We work closely with intellectual property attorneys to embed clear, comprehensive clauses covering IP ownership, exclusivity, and non-solicitation. These contracts not only protect our creative assets, but also establish mutual trust and expectations with clients and collaborators. This clarity reduces ambiguity and serves as a proactive deterrent against potential breaches. Reflecting on the ordeal, I realized that my professional growth extended beyond legal savvy and technical expertise. The experience reinforced the value of strategic patience and measured response. There was a time when I might have reacted emotionally or impulsively. Instead, I learned to channel frustration into methodical action, gathering evidence, consulting legal professionals, and communicating transparently with clients. This calm professionalism became my strongest asset, allowing me to navigate a complex situation without compromising our firm's reputation or client relationships. Financially, this transformation is reflected in my increased salary and equity ownership in the new firm. A 30% salary increase acknowledges not just my leadership, but also the added responsibilities I now bear in safeguarding the firm's intellectual property and client interests. Equity ownership ensures that I am deeply invested in the firm's success, aligning my vision with sustainable growth and ethical practice. Beyond numbers and contracts, the ordeal deepened my commitment to the principle that creative work belongs unequivocally to its rightful owner. Architecture is not merely the act of drawing lines on paper. It is the synthesis of creativity, knowledge, and collaboration. Protecting that work is protecting the very essence of what we offer to clients and the community. This conviction now informs every decision I make, from project inception to final delivery and beyond. The industry's recognition of our case as a precedent reinforced my belief that architects must be vigilant custodians of their intellectual property. I actively participate in professional forums and engage with peers to share insights from our experience. This dialogue fosters a culture of awareness and preparedness, helping other firms avoid pitfalls and embrace best practices in legal safeguards. As I look ahead, I am both cautious and optimistic. The wounds from betrayal have healed, replaced by a strengthened resolve and a clearer vision for what responsible architectural practice requires today. The fight for justice was demanding, but it ultimately reaffirmed my faith in the power of strategic expertise, rigorous documentation, and unyielding professionalism. In the quiet moments when I review a new project blueprint or consult with my team, I am reminded that this journey was not just about reclaiming stolen plans, it was about defining who I am as an architect and a leader. The calm, precise approach that sustained me through conflict is now the very ethos that drives our firm forward. This is not just a story of overcoming adversity. It is the ongoing story of honoring creative ownership, nurturing trust, and building a legacy that stands firm against any challenge. The future is open, filled with possibilities shaped by the lessons of the past and the unwavering commitment to protect and cherish every line drawn, every design conceived, and every project realized under our name.